Alright, I'm gonna drop the bombshell first, okay? I kinda like the idea of the Mandalorians not being all warrior code, Klingon, etc. You know, the peaceful thing. If you're still listening, I'll try to explain myself a little bit. I will admit it takes a little bit of headcanon to get there. See, to me, one of the things I've always disliked in fiction, going back as far as since I was a kid, was the idea of the planet of hats, or the race of hats. All Klingons are such and such, all Vulcans are such and such. Now, occasionally fiction has gotten away from that, and I've talked about this extensively over my Star Trek stuff, but the idea here that I like is the idea that not every Mandalorian agrees. Now, the problem here is that's kind of a more nuanced idea which would require multiple episodes to really flesh out. Instead, what we have is the peaceful to an extreme Mandalorians and the stupid, evil, violent Mandalorians to an extreme. And this isn't great. So, I will admit, I'm not saying that this is awesome. I just will admit that when I first saw this, it caught my attention. I was like, okay, maybe they're taking the Mandalorians in another angle. And I have to admit, I started kind of mentally headcanoning a little bit. Looking at this like, maybe the Death Watch is the extremists, which are being pushed by the separatists, but how much of the regular population is in favor of a more militant view? How many of the everyday people, or the people who are running for office, or the people who are in charge of whatever local defenses they have, are the people who are thinking, you know, maybe we should have a stronger military? You know, in other words, people who are not as extreme as Death Watch, but still people who do not agree with the current peaceful tone. How many of those people were probably pushed based on the horrors and nightmares and the sheer scale of devastation of the Clone Wars into basically voting for a platform they don't actually agree for? You know, saying, okay, we're going to go with Satine and her peaceful approach because I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want the Separatists coming down and destroying my territory. And I don't want the clones or the Jedi to be here mandating it either. So in one direction or another, staying out of this is a good idea. I also admit I love the idea of a neutral alliance. In fact, I love it so much I wish the show did far more about the neutral alliance. I love the concept of a group of planets who are basically not, like, may or may not be a part of the Republic officially, but by themselves are small enough that they have no real political, military, or economic or industrial power in order to say no and keep themselves protected and, again, out of the war. I mean, nobody wants to be a target for a separatist attack, right? So they band together. They find like-minded planets, like-minded systems, like-minded organizations that all group together and say, okay, we as an aggregate now have more political, military, and economic, etc. sway to try and ensure that neither side decides to try and pull us into the war. I love that idea. And it's basically just kind of a throwaway line here. It's a shame because I love these concepts that they don't really flesh out on. But it really got my brain going for some story ideas, I'll tell you what. Now, as for the episode itself, the main thing I want to comment on is how pathetic Obi-Wan is in this episode. I know that the Clone Wars episodes, the Clone Wars Obi-Wan has a tendency to snark a lot, but his snark was just cranked up to 11 for this one. Even after Satine saves his life, he still doesn't actually say thank you. In addendum to that, he's pathetic. I can't tell you how many times I'm just sitting here like, what are you doing, Obi-Wan? You got taken down by 2 Mandalorians. Which, I mean, fair enough, but you're Obi-Wan frickin' Kenobi. Come on, dude. And then he wakes up to the thing, and he's just relying on her to save him? He does still have the Force, right? I mean, it was just a pathetic showing, and I feel like the only reason it was there was to basically force her into the situation and circumstance so she can help him. And then, as a consequence, you know, she ended up, you know, finding out about the truth of this. In fact, if I was to be completely blunt, even though I absolutely do not think this, because I don't give that much credence to the writers of the Clone Wars, but if I was to speculate, I would say he was deliberately playing dead, so to speak. Like, oh, my leg, oh, I'm so helpless, please help me, Satine. Right? I would say that perhaps that's actually where he was going with this, because that would make more sense than he was actually helpless, but I digress. I will say one thing in favor of this episode, because I basically just complained about 2 things. I like the dynamic between Obi-Wan and Satine. Satine, to me, feels like someone who can match Obi-Wan. Someone who is just as convicted, just as experienced, and just as capable of talking her way through or around a situation. She's also very observant, and very committed to her cause, just like he is. The difference is, he is functionally a soldier, and she is trying to be a peacenik, and the two views are completely against each other. So I kind of like the dynamic the two have going. We'll see where it goes next time in whatever the name of the next episode is. See you around, guys.